All right, we're going to dive right in. Give me the 1 minute overview of your study.
Well, thanks for saying that, Stephanie. Let me just start by saying what a wonderful initiative that you're doing here. I'm amazed that the journal and you specifically are taking time putting this initiative out there, right? Giving a voice to these articles. Now, what I just did is I gave Stephanie a compliment, right? And
Oh,
some
and
people
you're
may
saying
see
it
that
wasn't
as,
sincere?
well, I'm not, no, it was sincere, right? You can do impression management behaviors because this is what this paper is about. You could do that in a very sincere way, but it is still impression management behavior, ingratiation, giving people compliments. Now, what our study did was show that when somebody does something like that, um, for some followers, that goes over pretty okay. They're like, yeah, you got to do this to survive in business. Others, however, would be like, Hannah's use line ball. What are you doing? I see right through you. You should never do that. And as a leader, it is very good to know which followers you have and therefore whether or not you should be engaging in impression management behavior. That's kind of the gist of it.
Got it. So, how would you define impression management?
Impression management is all sorts of behaviors that you utilize to, to uh, give a positive impression of yourself to the other person. Now, that's kind of a short summary.
And in this study, you're looking at whether leaders should or shouldn't engage in impression management, or what's the impact?
Well, we looked at whether or not leaders actually engage in impression management behavior and how that is perceived by the follower, specifically whether the follower sees that as having integrity or whether that's an ethical thing to do. And again, we saw and we did some interesting polls on that too. Yeah, half of the people think this is unethical, half of the people think this is actually an ethical thing to do.
Right.
And so we as a society, we seem to be really split on whether impression management is a necessary ingredient to business or something we should be that should be avoided at all costs. Yeah.
And I think everyone would want to know what's the answer? Should you do it or not? And I know you're going to say it depends, but what's the takeaway?
It does depend indeed. It depends on who it is that you're working with, right? So if as a leader, you need a lot of impression management, let's say towards your clients, but you hire somebody who fundamentally in their core believes that people shouldn't engage in impression management behavior, then you're stuck with a potential problem, right? Because that follower will view you as not having integrity. And because they don't see that, they don't trust you, it's harder for you to communicate to them what you want, there's no social exchange, and their performance goes down in the end. Now, there's a couple of options. You could decide for yourself, I don't need this impression management behavior, I can do without. You can also see if you can educate your follower or at least talk to them and explain to them why you use this impression management behavior. Because there's a version of this where you say like, well, it's expected of me as, for example, a salesperson to embellish, to make this a little bit bigger. And if we get that in that contract, that means I can now pay your salary for the next 3 years. So I'm just this is part of the game for me to help you as a follower. But what you see underneath here is like there's different perceptions of what is ethical as a leader. And so that's what we're playing with in this study.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so how did you ever get interested in this topic? As someone who's really more focused on authenticity, this is kind of the
Yeah,
opposite of that.
yeah, this is true. I've 10 years of authenticity research. But there's this famous article by Carr in Harvard Business Review, and the title of that is "Business Bluffing Ethical?" And they compare business to a poker game, and they say like in a poker game, you know, obviously you should bluff or lie or misrepresent or because that's just it, and it's not it's okay to do that because it's just part of the game, right? Um, and this article has been reprinted a couple of times, and every time it stirs up controversy, and people are like, no, you shouldn't do that, or yes, that makes perfect sense. And so people are really split on this issue. So this made me think like there's something there. We really need to uncover what is going on. And so that's kind of what at least triggered me. I can't speak for my co-authors, but this is what really triggered me
Yeah,
to study this.
I love that paper. So I'm here with Hannes Leroy, a self-described social engineer who helps develop people to become better leaders, and he's one of the co-authors on this article, and we're going to link it below. Does leaders' impression management help or hurt? It depends on the perspective of the follower. So what do you think is the implications of this for a leader? And I'll also ask you in the same breath, like what surprised you about the findings?
I, I think I'll start with the second. The surprise for me, something that to this day I'm still struggling with how to even implement that is what we view as ethical or unethical behavior on part of a leader is um, is subjectively colored, right? As we show in this study, for some followers, impression management behavior is not just even uh, it's not unethical. They even saw it as ethical. They see like, yeah, no, impression is needed. You need to do this because it'll improve your effectiveness as a leader. And when I teach, um, classes on authenticity and politics in the workplace, some people can get a really strong knee-jerk reaction again, like I will never do politics and I don't need any political skills because they're very focused on their authenticity. But then I try to convey to them, like, well, wait a minute, no, you as a leader need resources. You need to have connections to be able to help your followers. And for that, political skills is really necessary. So, but to go back to what is ethical is subjective. Depending on context, depending on the person, their values, maybe their cultural values, their background, what they view as ethical or not. So it made me realize like I gotta be careful. And I would advise everybody to be careful to not assume that your view of what is ethical or not is somebody else's view. So go out with openness, with curiosity, try to discover how others view the world. And this is maybe, and have a sense of what I call moral humility,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
realizing that your own perspective on what is ethical is maybe not the all defining. And I'm not making a plea for moral relativism where everything goes, right? You hold your own, make sure that there are certain lines in the sand that you don't cross, but also realize that different people may have different perspectives. Did that make any sense? Or
nope.
uh,
What would you do if you were a leader in a multinational organization where there's not only do people have different approaches to ethics, as you said, but now if you layer in culture where people coming from different cultures, how would you decide on how you behave or communicate with your team?
that you make an assumption here, Stephanie, that I have enough willpower and conscious decision making that I can choose what I do when I do it. And I've done enough authenticity research to see that sometimes people just either they're a natural self
Yeah.
monitor and they engage in it, or they naturally engage to it. But I would advise, or if I were, I would see who it is that I'm dealing with, and
Right.
if I when I gave you that compliment in the beginning, again, a genuine compliment, I would see how you would react to it. If you're like, if your eyebrows are already raised and you're like, Hannah's, I know what you're doing here, you sleazy slime ball. That'll be like, okay, sorry, I was just trying to. I would depend on, I would adjust depending on who I have in front of me, pretty much. Um,
How do
yeah.
people know if it's impression management or if you're just a nice person or if I really was deserving of that compliment?
Yeah. They in this goes beyond impression management in political skill,
Mhm.
right? Now it's not just the knee-jerk reaction of ingratiation and things, but now you're really skilled at it. One of the subcomponents that is apparent sincerity. So that seems to suggest you've really mastered this if people genuinely believe
Right.
what
Yeah.
you're doing. Now, to go back to the beginning, the easiest way to do that is just to be sincere,
Yeah.
right? Like I really meant what I said. Like I think this is a great initiative, and you're going out of your way to do this for the journal. I know me repeating this is probably like, well, Hannes, no, but seriously, I mean that, and that's the easiest way. So me engaging in impression management doesn't mean I have to lie or misrepresent. That's sometimes what people think. No, you're consciously choosing in that moment to be like, hey, let me highlight this positive thing. I don't think that's necessarily unethical. Um, if you do it all the time to manipulate people to get your way, yeah, that's something else.
Yeah.
That's then it gets yeah, for me at least, then it gets a little wonky.
Yeah. Okay. For non-researchers, how did you and your team go about studying this topic?
For non-researchers, so we looked at dyads. Dyads is pairs of leaders and followers, where we really just were interested in, hey, does this leader engage in impression management behaviors, and to what extent does the follower value impression management behavior, even engage in impression management behaviors, him or herself, right? And so with those dyads and those different perspectives, we looked at, well, if a leader um, engages in impression management behavior, but then the follower says like, I don't care for it, is this leader still viewed by the follower as ethical? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
However, again, if the leader is high in impression management and the follower says like, no, I think then we actually see positive effect. Then we see that leaders are viewed as more ethical.
And that's
Yeah,
for both of them, they're self-reporting. So they have
yeah,
to have that self-awareness, first of all, that they're doing it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So this is my last question for you. I'm going to turn that on you and see your self-awareness. Do you,
Okay.
Hannes Leroy, engage in impression management when you're working with people?
Oh, I should have seen this one coming. Yes, obviously. I think to some extent, this makes me think of the. I don't know if you know these in surveys, we often insert questions to see whether people are engaging in impression management tactics. And so one of the questions could be, do you never engage into impression management tactics? Well, if people say yes to that, yes, that they never do this, I'd be like, you're lying. There's,
Yeah.
I think all of us do, some to a more extent, some to a lesser extent, and I'm no exception. Um, I think I've learned over years to like, yeah, try to have it be genuine. Um, choose your moment. Um, but yes, my name is Hannes, and I do engage in impression management tactics.
Thank you for your authenticity. If you want to know more about Hannes or the Journal of Leadership and Organizational Studies or this particular article, there's lots of information linked below. Thanks, Hannes, for your time today. And now I don't believe anything you said because I think you engage in impression management. I'm just kidding. Thank you so much.
All right.